All right, well, we are back, Jim and Amanda, here at the MacArthur Memorial. And a few days ago, we released a talk on MacArthur's heroes, and then we invited questions about that topic from listeners and viewers of that program. And thank you we do have some questions, so we are just going to get right into those right now. First question. Which of the fleet commanders in the Pacific during World War II did Douglas MacArthur most respect?
Well, I think Halsey's the one he's closest to.
Mm-hmm.
After the war, he'll say that, that Nimitz is unrivaled as one of the greatest admirals there is. He'll also even compliment Admiral King, Fleet Admiral King. He doesn't get along with him well during the war, but after the war, he says, that it was only because of King that the war didn't go on for like a couple of more years.
Because King sided with the
Right,
return to the Philippines.
and more so because at first they said they want to just have a strategic defensive in the Pacific, but King's really the one that alters all their thinking, especially after the Coral Sea and Midway. He was like, look, we've creamed all these carriers, we've got to move now, and so that's what makes him drop into Guadalcanal, and MacArthur goes into Bunagona, and they start supplying those areas. And MacArthur thought if it hadn't been for King, that probably never would have happened. So I mean, as far as like the war itself, I think of course Halsey is the one that he is closest to. He did question the chase of Ozawa's carriers at Leyte Gulf, but when the staff was really raging against Halsey, MacArthur beat the table and said, "I'm not going to hear one more word against Bull."
Right.
And because he's still a fighting admiral in my book, so he was loyal to him throughout. And I think that after the war's over, when they're not fighting over supplies and shipping and strategy and all that, then that's when he's like, these guys were the best.
And Kenny
I think
admired, or at least his talent in that area.
I think Kenny schooled him quite a bit on air power. I think that MacArthur had complete trust in him, because he basically gives him the air corps, and it's up to you what you do with it. I mean, he'll overrule him at times during those strategy conferences about certain operations, but I think he has complete and unlimited trust in him, and as well as Whitehead, who was the bomber commander, Ennis Whitehead, for Kenny. And when the war ends and they want to bring Kenny back to this SAC command, and as well they wanted to bring Whitehead back, MacArthur was like, no, you can take Kenny, but if you take Whitehead too, then I have nothing, and you're just causing a big problem, because he's the only guy that can run this out here. So MacArthur has complete trust in both of those people.
Yeah. So the question was about fleet commanders, but in terms of these air commanders, true. Okay, next question. Did MacArthur consider Robert E. Lee to be a hero, or did he just admire the military generalship of Lee?
Well, he doesn't really write about Lee. We know that, Freeman, the great biographer of Lee, comes out to see MacArthur in the latter part of the war, and then he goes to see him in Japan as well, and he gave MacArthur the set of 4 Robert E. Lee, and they were of the first 100 copies that they had. I think that all those people, like we were talking about the other day, all those people at West Point studied from all of them. It wasn't like, oh, he was a Confederate. No, it was like, what can I learn from this guy? I mean, Nathan Bedford Forrest, he's the guy who kind of begins the Klan, basically. But he was also a very incredible tactician. And they all study him. They still study him, up till to today. So, I mean, if you're a military person and you're not studying them just, because of what they would, then you're an idiot.
Yeah.
And so, does he admire him as a hero? I think MacArthur's more of a Unionist, like his father, than that. But he never desecrates his memory or anything like that.
I don't see MacArthur as real attached to kind of a lost cause sort of mythology. I think he's very practical. And I think he sees Lee as somebody very talented in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he also admires in defeat how he manages that. And I think he, definitely wants to learn from him. But I'm thinking of that video that we saw of Eisenhower.
Right.
And I mean, a similar kind of West Point guy, studied this like MacArthur did. And that as president, and he's a unionist. I mean, he's obviously, like MacArthur, all about the United States as a union.
Yeah.
Probably glad the way the Civil War ends. But he has a portrait of Lee in the Oval Office.
Right.
Here's somebody that he's saying, like, there's something to be learned and admired about this person. He's in the pantheon of, like, America's military figures.
Well, Eisenhower, I think, saw that without Lee, the country wouldn't have healed as
Mm-hmm.
fast as it did. Because Lee was, nope, it's over, surrender.
Mm-hmm.
And what if he had said, it's still on?
Yeah.
I mean, the Jesse James gang was made out of the Civil War, and the whole time that they were robbing banks, it was, I'm just killing Yankees, and there would have been thousands of those kind of bands if Lee had said, keep it up. And as well, Lee said, don't erect any monuments to the Confederacy. He didn't want that because he could see them being torn down, and he didn't want Confederate graves dug up. And so that's why, that Eisenhower, I think, was, he was critical to the future of the United States. If it hadn't been for him, the
Mm-hmm.
South wouldn't, or the nation wouldn't have healed
Mm-hmm.
as fast as it did.
Mm. I think MacArthur would have agreed.
Yeah, probably
with
so.
that.
He just never writes it down.
Yeah.
In that sense.
Yeah. And then the second part of that question was, what about his mom? Did she consider Lee to be a hero? And I'm just going to say yes to that one.
Yeah, her
she's a Virginian.
Her niece.
She's a Virginian.
Her niece, who was Mary Symington, the daughter of Arthur III, said that she was melancholy because she felt like she betrayed her country, which was the South.
Yeah.
I mean, she marries the #1 super Yankee. All her sisters married Yankees.
Yeah.
They wanted to get out of the depression of the South, basically. But I think that was always with her. Mm-hmm. That her 4 brothers had fought under Robert E. Lee.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you think about, she's thinking, again, she's a Virginian. You've got George Washington in her pantheon, probably, and then you have Robert E. Lee. And then I think in her own mind, her son is half a Virginian. So, I mean, he kind of continues that lineage, I think, for her.
And she's always in his ear. You have to be like these people.
Mm-hmm.
You have to live up to this sense of duty and honor like your father has. So it would seem that, she would definitely be holding on to those old values that she had.
Yeah. All right, next question. Were there any ancient philosophers he admired?
Well, he quotes Plato and Santayana, both of those, and he will quote, scripture. So I think that, and if you look at his library, he's got, the Upanishads in there. He's got the Mormon Bible. He's got all these religious, and people.
Marcus Aurelius'
meditations. Yeah. So I mean, he's definitely aware of them all. It's with MacArthur. When does he write it down? Or does he talk about it to anyone? And those we know, but this guy is one of these people who I think picks up those golden nuggets of knowledge from everyone.
Yeah. I went through his speeches last night to see if he ever talked about it. Plato's the one that he most often kind of refers to, and there was only one other that I saw in most of those speeches that he gave in the interwar year period to the kind of end of his life, and it was Dionysius of Halicarnassus. I might have butchered that, and he was basically using him as kind of an example of saying the law of nature in his mind was that it is always going to be the case that the strong dominates the weak. And so he uses that a lot, in that interwar year period, and then he uses it, I think, later on in talking about Korea, as the great philosopher said.
Hmm.
But anyways, okay. Next question. Were there any other foreign leaders he considered to be his heroes?
Well, we know he thought a lot of Ataturk, the Turkish leader after World War One, who was trying to modernize Turkey, and he met with him, in that 1930s trip. Kazan, he has great admiration for, even though they're opposites politically. I think he had a great respect for John Curtin in Australia. I mean, they work extremely well together,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe even Yoshida. We don't, we know he says about Chang. I don't care what he is as long as he's anti-communist. And so, I mean, he would look at, I think, and you wonder about Ri,
Mm-hmm.
of Korea and these other people. Does he revere them, or does he think they're patriots? He doesn't really say, but he works with them all. But I think there are a few that he really looks to as being better than a lot of the others. But I think Kazan's probably the foreign leader that he is most fond of.
But I think there's a difference too between admiration and hero.
Yeah.
I don't know that
very
he
much
really any of the contemporaries. I don't think he looks at any of them except for maybe Pershing when he was younger as like a hero in his time. Maybe Pershing, Funston, his dad.
His dad, yeah.
But not a lot of contemporary. And certainly, I think by the time
Certainly
of the
not
Korean
politicians.
War,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
I don't think there's anyone during the Korean
Yeah.
War where he's thinking, "Wow, I really," except for maybe the American
Hoover,
soldier,
and he thinks Hoover is somewhat of a good
a
guy.
master diplomat and statesman. Yeah. So maybe, but he does always go back to that idea of like the soldier, the one that he's seen on all these battlefields. This amalgamation of like all of these troops that he's led, that he does seem to idolize as like the pinnacle of what society can produce. The soldier willing to sacrifice himself for duty.
No, I would say that too. That amalgamation of different principles that makes the ultimate soldier. Sure.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Would MacArthur have considered historian Mary Beard to be among the people he admired?
I have no idea. I know that Mary Beard writes to SCAP, during the occupation about MacArthur and women's enfranchisement, but he doesn't ever say what he thinks about her.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything where he talks about her, but except that in his autobiography and that footnote about the women's suffrage that he helped with, he does really use that opportunity to say like this really wonderful scholar, Dr. Mary Beard says that I did an amazing job here.
I missed
and
that.
This is just
I missed that.
No, I mean, so he, I don't know, maybe he admires her because she very publicly admired him.
Right, who does?
But he does, I mean, there's this huge footnote in Reminiscences where he repeats like a letter or some public statement she made saying that MacArthur and this thing that he's done for women and children in Japan is just the greatest thing that could have happened.
And that's the only thing I remember about her. Yeah.
So we don't know if he followed her work, but he definitely knew who she was and was definitely happy to have her endorsement.
Support, sure.
All right, what about his mother and wife? I think we talked about them in the previous recording, but what qualities did he mention that he found admirable about each of them?
Well, I think, the mom is especially special. I mean, we've talked about that before, about helping him work his way through things, and she's like probably his number one confidant. She's the person who keeps everything together when they're out there on the frontier, making it a home. And she'll always be that way, I think, with him. And I think Jean just kind of, takes over that role when she dies. I mean, because MacArthur's almost immediately married to her, cemented to Jean after his mom dies. So I think that both of them were were incredibly important to him, probably more than any other people.
Yeah.
You know?
They're both, I think, very feminine in kind of that traditional sense that he would have been used to, but I think also both incredibly strong. You know, like his mom on the frontier, Jean on Corregidor, and I think they're both, maybe Jean more than his mom, absolutely committed to duty on her country too. They get the mission, you know, and they're partners in that mission. So very loyal, very dedicated to the country, to the army,
supporting him.
Were there any other founding fathers that MacArthur considered one of his heroes?
Well, we know he keeps the portraits of Washington and Lincoln on his wall in Japan, and he'll often say that, you know, my guides or my mentors for this job in the occupation were Lincoln and Washington, and that's what he says about them.
In his speeches, he talks mostly about Washington, Lincoln, and then Jefferson.
Yeah, because of those constitutional principles that he tries to apply to Japan as well.
And then he sometimes talks about Ben Franklin, but it's more of Ben Franklin as kind of a very cheeky member of like the founding fathers group. He always has these little anecdotes about funny things Ben Franklin said, or but I didn't, when I looked at his speeches last night, I didn't see Madison, yeah. I didn't see,
or Adams, you know, either one of them. No.
Yeah.
No.
So it would seem that Jefferson, Washington, Lincoln are his top, with Ben Franklin sprinkled in there every now and then. Okay, so for a leader that also held his faith close to his heart, did he look to heroes in the Bible?
Well, he says he and his staff even says that he's reading it every day. I don't really remember though. I'd have to go back and look at those as far as, you know, he'll talk about certain passages in speeches, but he doesn't really say anything about, you know, various personas or like the wisdom of Solomon or anything like that. You know, he doesn't really ever lay that out. You know, he'll talk about Jesus a lot.
With great reverence.
Yeah.
You know,
and he puts that in a lot of his speeches, where he talks. So I mean, it's
But Jesus isn't a hero to him. Jesus is God. Like he's got his pantheon of heroes, and then I think the way he talks about his father is the top of that pantheon, and then I think you have Jesus Christ at the top for him.
You know, probably.
I've only ever seen him talk about David and Goliath, and even that was more a metaphor for a military problem or thing he was trying to explain. But I don't, other than Jesus, I don't think I've ever seen him name another biblical character.
No, and just the philosophy of Christianity, which I think was, you know, what he based a lot of things on, because that's what, you know, he'll believe that is something important for Japan after the war, you know, as this democratizing spirit, you know, the spirit of Christianity as well. So.
All right, just two more questions. Was Geronimo on the list of heroes?
I've never seen him say anything. He'll talk about the American Indian quite reverently. You know, when he's given that chief status by the Blackfeet, you know, he'll say that, you know, that they're the noblest and the greatest warriors. When he talks about World War I, he talks about how they had to adopt the fighting style of the American Indian, you know, to be able to fight on the trench warfare. So I mean, he has great reverence for him. I mean, he grew up around, you know, Navajo and Apache as well, and he would often, you know, he always considered himself a frontiersman because of his life with them. And he would say, I learned to track people, you know, from the Apache when I was a kid, you know, which, if you're able to say that, that's got to be the most valued thing that you
Right.
hold on to, from if you grew up on the frontier, that, I learned to track from the masters of it, so I think he has great reverence for all the American Indian warriors, but he doesn't really pick out any like Crazy Horse or Geronimo or Sitting Bull or any of them really.
That brings up an interesting point, though, because it seems that he just has such tremendous respect across the board for all types of people if they are very skilled at something.
Sure.
It doesn't matter if they were on the losing side or the former enemy.
Yeah.
It's this person or this group of people excel at this, and I admire that.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter maybe if it's politically correct to feel that way or not.
Right.
In his mind, there's value in this, and there's something in me for this. And so I think he's always very willing to look everywhere and find something. You don't tend to see him say, hey, these people are awful. These people are, we need to get rid of these people, or these people are evil forever. He's very, I think, pragmatic.
Well, as a military person, you're trying, you should be trying to understand every military conflict there is and what went right and what went wrong. And I think you could see a lot about the American Indian that was, very much worthy of study.
Last question. This pertains to the Korean War. MacArthur led forces to early victory with the Incheon landing. Did he have a Pantheon hero of the past that guided him to the success? And then later, when the war took an unexpected opposite turn to unfortunate demise?
Well, at Incheon, we know that in that meeting where he meets with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he brings up Wolfe and Montcalm at Quebec and scaling the heights and meeting him on the Plains of Abraham. And so, I mean, that's in his mind there. That surprise is the key element of all victory in war, no matter what time frame it is. It's funny because Basil Liddell Hart will write MacArthur and say, "Was it my book? Was it my book that cued you into Wolfe? Was I the one?" And Liddell Hart would do that with like everybody.
Yeah.
Was it my book that you read that got you thinking that way? And so I think that definitely in that sense, Incheon probably goes to them, to Wolfe and Wolfe scaling the heights there and taking them behind.
Defeat. Is there a hero in his pantheon that he could look to in kind of after getting fired and say,
Well, I don't know. Probably his dad.
Yeah.
Probably his dad. That once again politicians
defeated by politicians
have
and
destroyed.
bureaucrats.
And that's the way he'll look at it.
Or is it like Alexander in India at that river? Gotta turn back. Or Napoleon on Elba. I'll come back.
I don't know. I
That's
mean,
hard one.
he's just trying to rescue the situation at that point, and then at the moment that they're about to really destroy the Chinese, with the spring and summer offensives, that's when he's out. Because when Van Fleet comes in, when MacArthur leaves, Van Fleet said we could have gone all the way back to the Yalu again, but then we'd been back in the same situation we were before, not able to supply everything up there. So
when we saw that quote in Reminiscences the other day about Pershing, when MacArthur says, through these difficult times in the Pacific War and then in the Korean War, I always imagine, I could feel Pershing's warm
steady hand
on my back.
Right,
so
yeah.
I wonder, is perhaps Pershing, they obviously different career trajectories and ends of their careers, but maybe he took some comfort in knowing.
Does he feel that way throughout? And he'll say that about Korea. The quote from Stonewall Jackson, which is, I'll fight him with sticks and stones if I have to. And he'll say that a number of times to people. So I mean, those people are cropping up no matter what kind of situation he's in. This makes me think of that person. This makes me think of that person. So definitely well read and definitely
Yeah.
well rounded on historical perspective, I think.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And I think we've covered them all, and I think we'll close on that. So thank you, Jim,
Thank
for
you,
your time.
Amanda
And
Williams.
no, it's no problem at all. And thank you for your questions that were submitted. We kind of enjoy talking these things out and puzzling them out. So I think we'll try to do this again sometime soon.
Okay.